Hi, I'm Carrie Grant. It's Neurodiversity Week and I really want to celebrate that because I'm parent to 4 children who are neurodiverse. So I thought the way that we would do this is to have a little chat with some of my friends and one member of my family, and we could talk about their neurodiversity and also something called intersectionality. So you may have heard that word before, but if you haven't, it's basically where we have more than one part of our identity that makes us different to the majority of the society we find ourselves living in. So that means we're diverse in more than one way. And sometimes we're diverse in 3 or 4 different ways. So I'm really looking forward to this chat, and these are my guests.
Sabini-Roberts, Olive Gray, and Sophie Toms.
Okay, so let's have little introductions before we get going. Let's start with Sophie Toms.
I am a 2020 graduate of East 15's BA Acting and Community Theatre. And that tells you a lot about where I am in my life right now, just straight off the bat, because I didn't get a graduation. I was diagnosed autistic a year ago. And yeah, I'm also queer, which is a great term because if you ask me to define how I am queer, I will have a miniature meltdown in the corner. So just queer.
Okay, I'm going to come back to some of that because it's very interesting. Let's go to Olive.
I'm Olive. I am non-binary. My pronouns are they, them. I'm queer also. I have ADHD, which I was diagnosed when I was 18. So 8 years ago now. I'm still figuring it out. But one of my biggest passions around ADHD is educating other people with ADHD in order to advocate for themselves. Because I think that that's like the greatest tool and the greatest thing that can help change things around ADHD. I am Sagittarius. I am a creative, and I process most things through art.
I love that. I love that you know that about yourself. And let's go over to G.
Hi, I'm G. I'm a parent. I'm a business owner. I operate a lot in the online entrepreneurial space. I do various things there. I'm also non-binary. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. And I'm also queer, and I'm also autistic, which is something I didn't realize until I was in my mid-30s. So you guys got a head start on me, let's put it that way.
So actually, all of you would be termed as having quite late diagnosis.
Yeah.
Because none of you were diagnosed, what Olive, you're saying 18, but even that was late. So was there a lot of misunderstanding growing up and going through school? Sophie, what was that like for you?
School for me was traumatic, I think is the easiest way of summing it up. I definitely was not built for standardized education. I'm a musician, a singer, an actor, a creative writer, and they're not given a lot of weight. They're things that if you can do it, it's a lovely extra. What a lovely talent you have, but you get back to the maths and the science, please, and the essay writing, because you go out into the real world and suddenly all you do is write essays. So on top of that, I've got a lot of the social issues that come with autism, but I mask massively.
What does that mean?
Masking. It's what it sounds like. It's you wear a mask, you blend in. I am like, how do I present myself in a way that's palatable to the people around me? So I've recently started a theatre company with 2 of my friends. And we'll get to a point where we're meeting on Zoom and I'm just wiped and I'll just go, I'm sorry, I'm too tired to neurotypical.
Olive, for you were, obviously, because you're my child, you know, you were very compliant, very sweet child, and yet very early on in school and throughout school, actually, somehow were told that your behaviour was wrong, that it wasn't good enough, that you didn't fit. So what was
Yeah.
that
The
like?
whole time I was in the education system. I think that I think I have a kind of inherent thing that I always want to get it right. And so I very early on realized that that wasn't working because I was trying to get it right, but then I was getting distracted, and then I was told I was being, you know, willfully disobedient or trying to be disruptive or trying to be naughty. And I think also there's so many layers into that. I think that there's the ADHD thing, and I think that there's also a slight thing of like race that always comes to play in things like this. Like, I think that we have to look at the stereotypes within like racism that were birthed in slavery around Black people being lazy, around Black people being disruptive, around Black people being all of those things that I was labeled as, that I also think came under my ADHD, I think weren't viewed with the kind of empathy or sensitivity, because on top of that, there were already these racial biases that existed. And so I think for me, there was this kind of realization very quickly that no matter how hard I tried, I wasn't going to be able to get it right. And so I think that at a certain point, probably in secondary school, I realized that if I wasn't going to be able to get it right at getting it right, then I could get it really, really right at their worst views of me. And so I kind of completely switched off all caring. I completely dissociated, and I was kind of just like, yeah, whatever. And that attitude of, yeah, whatever, made people come in 10 times harder with the criticisms, which, you know, and I would act like I didn't care. And it would just be, I think I was quite traumatized from my experience of education. And I think there's still, education is your entire life up until most people are 18. And for me, up until I was 21. So of course, there is going to be unpicking potentially for the rest of my life in different ways as to how that's affected me.
So Sophie, when you went to uni and then you were in an environment where it was all about singing and dancing, did you expect, this is where I'm going to find my people, they're going to love me, and I'm going to fit right in?
You asked that kind of knowing the answer. No. Well, yes, I expected it. It just did not happen. I don't know quite how to describe it. Every day was so stressful. It was so stressful. Every day there was just this pressure. It's constant, like living in a pressure cooker. And just in ways that I found really difficult to catch. So by the time I got to third year, I was kind of like, oh yeah, this person's being a dick. But in first year, especially because it takes me kind of like a good 6 months at least to properly settle into a new environment. So I was very withdrawn. I wasn't on medication for my anxiety at that point. Didn't have an autism diagnosis, didn't have any notion that I was autistic. Even though you dropped hints, I don't pick up hints.
I think I dropped quite a lot of very big hints.
Yeah, but the thing is, the biggest hint needs to be, Sophie, I think you're autistic, and you didn't with that one.
Yeah, that's definitely just a practice. Do not drop hints around an autistic person. I'll tell a story about how I realised I was queer at some point, because it's exactly the same. I had no clue.
Similarly, going to drama school, I had this kind of idea that I was finally going to be around my people. Finally, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in a place where this is where all the misfits gather. This is where the people who don't necessarily fit in all kind of can band together. And I felt like so excited to feel this sense of belonging. And I think that was what made it all the harder when that didn't happen, is that I think I very rarely, because of my experience of education, allowed myself to hope that things could be good, because I think it was too dangerous to hope that things could be good. I needed to protect myself, so I always expected the worst. And so I think I was almost quite blindsided going to drama school and suddenly finding that I was being bullied by the people in my year, and then I was being bullied by the teachers, and then I was experiencing racism. And it was a couple of months after I'd just been diagnosed with ADHD and coming to terms with figuring out what that even meant, and then being told off for things that I didn't have the voice yet to advocate that this was actually literally just part of my ADHD, a trait of my ADHD, and just loads of stuff going on all these different medications. I must have tried like, how many? It was like 13 or something medications. And for some reason, I've never had a reaction to medication in my life, but every single ADHD medication I tried, there was some weird adverse reaction that was like the last thing on the list of like, you might get hives. I had hives, like, you know, and palpitations. Some of them gave me asthma attacks. Some of them made me sick, and having to go through all of these weird things happening in my body, whilst also spending sometimes at least 5, often 6 days a week, 12-hour days at drama school, in the pits of hell. Like really, it was like entering into the lion's den every single day with a brain that was working in ways that I didn't even know how to figure out because of this weird medications.
Because your story, you know, it's an interesting one. You know, your child is being assessed for autism, and then suddenly in the middle of that, you're like, hang on a minute, this is ringing some bells.
Basically, that was it. Entirely that. My child was going through the process, and all of these traits and behaviors and all of the list of things that people were ticking off, it was like, well, but that's normal because that's me. And it was making that connection that actually maybe I was looking at it the other way around. But again, very, very similar history. The whole dropping hints thing, I realized I was gay the day I was 15, and I asked my best friend if I could kiss her, and she said, "You're gay." And that was my light bulb moment. I hadn't got a clue until that point. Hints don't work.
Amazing, isn't it? That's so interesting, because that is those intersections working together. What were your experiences? Because you were just a little bit older, and as a parent as well, have you found your people, do you think?
These days, most definitely, yes. But it, as both Sophie and Olive have said, it's not an easy journey getting there. For me, early school days were very traumatic. They were very lonely because I hadn't got a clue about social skills. But for me, the changes happened relatively early on in the game, because I was 10, 11 years old when, again, it was a drama thing. I got given the lead in Oliver. And
what a role.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a small primary school, you know, there were 60 kids.
That.
But, you know.
Well done.
We're impressed.
Okay, but I think I probably was cast because they knew that I was a very attentive student, and I'd probably be one of the few that would remember the lines. So I think that's probably had more to do with it than anything else. However, I got that part, and I remember being on the stage during rehearsals and deliberately overacting terribly as an experiment. I wonder what will happen if, when the teacher pretends to drag me across the stage by my ear, I act as though it really hurts. And the teacher let go of me and said, "Are you okay?" And the rest of the kids all fell about laughing. And for the first time ever, the kids were laughing with me and not at me. And it was a very direct correlation between, I can act a part that means they're going to like me. Wow. I've got it. I know what I can do. So I was 10 years old, so it was too early to work out the consequences of all of this, but it was a very conscious awakening to the concept of masking at that time. And there began my experiments in, what role do I play today to try and get on better than I did yesterday with these other human beings that feel like aliens. But that coincided with then starting high school and inadvertently happening to sit next to somebody who was also a proper bookworm like me, and we had that in common, and then playing in the orchestra and hanging out with the other people who were the music geeks, and finding this slightly alternative, different people who were generally much more tolerant of my quirks as well. And bearing in mind, no one had a clue. The concept of autism was not present in a child that appeared, certainly was academically capable, and appeared, certainly when speaking one-to-one to an adult, to get on quite well, actually. So the social side was always the challenge, but it did get easier. I mean, the world of work was a whole other kit and caboodle, actually getting employed and staying employed for longer than 18 months. Well, I've never actually managed that one, but that's one of the reasons why, for me, now 9 years into running my own business, I'm really passionate about promoting the idea of entrepreneurship and business ownership to everybody, but to young people, especially neurodiverse young people, because we are often square pegs in round holes.
Do you think that neurodiverse people are more open to evolving, actually, what is my identity? Who am I? I don't know, my neurotypical friends kind of find who they are, they stick with it from 18 and then they just get wrinklier, but they kind of stay the same. Whereas my neurodiverse friends are like, oh, I think I'll just try something completely new.
I think when it stresses you out to change your shampoo, you just get used to the idea of change being stressful. You just kind of get over it. So like, yeah, okay, I've changed my sexual orientation, identity, but also I'm trying a new shampoo, and that's really more pressing on me right now. Like, there's no concept of scale for me. Like,
I think there's like definitely something to be said about, I don't know if changing is the right word, because I don't feel like I have changed, particularly in terms of my queerness, my gender. I think that that's something that I have, I guess, come out or spoken about, but I don't feel that that's something that's necessarily changed. However, I definitely think that like when you sit outside of any kind of binary, like being neurotypical is a binary. Like like when you sit outside of that as it is, I think instantly like it opens up your mind to, I guess, like the boldness to be able to explore like how you actually fit, and really the curiosity and like inquisition into like into yourself as to how you fit within the world. And I think that, you know, maybe people who are cis or any, if you fit into any binary, I think that you're then therefore like more likely to maybe be more comfortable in other binaries, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that does. G?
Yeah, I really like the way you defined that, Olive. I wonder, is there, I don't know the answer to this is a question, is there a sense of fear here? So when somebody has never been challenged about the box that they feel that they sit in, because it's always stayed comfortable, to then be faced with the prospect of actually maybe I'm different in some way or the other way, it's more of a challenge to somebody who's already had to get over climbing out of that box once. So actually, I've done that once, I'm still here, it's okay, what's the next one? It breaks that apart a bit more.
Yeah, it really makes sense.
I was very religious growing up, like very, very strict Christian. These are the rules and you will stick to them. So even though I was massively uncomfortable, that's all I'd ever known. So it was this kind of, life is just about being uncomfortable. Like, that's what a good life is. If you're doing life well, it's uncomfortable. And sure enough, I mean, I let go of, you know, I think it's maybe okay if other people are gay. I think it's maybe okay if people have sex outside marriage. I think that's maybe okay. Oh, okay. I think it's maybe okay if I'm not completely straight. Okay. Ooh, right. Actually, now I think back on that one thing, that was super not a straight moment in my life.
It's only often when you begin to like edge out of the binary in a kind of to yourself and in a public way that you realize how much of the world is so ridiculously binary about everything that of course it's terrifying. It's almost the fabric of society. You feel like, oh my gosh, am I like, you feel like you're going against the grain of like the entire like population of Earth just by choosing to be open and honest about the fact that you don't fit in that binary thing. So I think it's terrifying, and I think that's why it's terrifying even for people to accept it in other people. Because it's like, but it's really safe for me to believe that everyone is this and everyone is this. It's really safe for me to believe everyone's neurotypical. So if you're acting like that, it's because you're choosing to do this. It's safe for me to believe everyone's a boy and everyone's a girl. So if you're feeling like that, it's because it's your choice. It's your feeling that way. And I think that that's actually safer for people, because in accepting that people aren't the same as you, that is so, it means the world goes from like this to this like uncontainable thing. We can't contain it. And I think that so much of even, religion and legalistic religion particularly is so much about creating certainties and creating a container. We can put everything in this thing, and that makes it really, really safe. And living outside of that is so, it's like skydiving. It's so liberating, but it is terrifying.
Can I go back to you, G, because you're the one that first introduced this word fear. The other guys here have spoken so candidly and, oh my gosh, just beautifully about their experience of that. What's been your experience with that?
Of fear personally, I'm not sure where exactly I managed to let go of a lot of it, but I think it's the point when I accepted, you know what, I'm just in free fall now, to use the prior example, is my gender doesn't fit in that. My brain wiring doesn't fit in that. If I look right here, my sexuality doesn't fit in that. Nothing about me fits in any of these boxes. Oh, well, still here, still breathing. Right, what next? And there's a wonderful freedom that comes with that. And I want to bounce off what both of you were saying earlier, Sophie and Olive, about the anxiety and the fear and the stress that you feel and you sense from the world to you. And the positive side of that I've experienced, certainly in the last couple of years, as I've started personally to be more and more public about talking about, actually, let's look at this and break this apart a bit. Let's have a conversation about what happens if we take gender out of this conversation. Where do all these people fit? Oh, look, they're just people. How do we deal with that? And the same for other binaries. And generally speaking, I don't know if it's good fortune because I've managed to put myself in a world now where I'm mostly surrounded by really forward-thinking, positive people, but overwhelmingly, the response has been positive. And people have wanted to engage. And maybe it's timing as well. Maybe enough people have started to say this in the background that enough ears have pricked up. So as we're now stepping out and saying these things, and hey, I'm another one of these people that doesn't fit in your boxes, but hi, nice to meet you. We break that down a little bit more and more.
Do you ever feel offended by people's curiosity?
No. I think that might be an autistic thing. I don't tend to emotionally respond to other people's behaviors massively. I get tired by it. Sometimes I haven't got the energy for it, but I'm getting better. I haven't got there yet. Getting better at saying, yeah, I'm done for the moment. I'm walking away today. But yeah, so no, and this is what I find really interesting. I mean, I do get afraid of stuff, but it's other things. So I have other forms of anxiety that come along with my neurodiversity, but it's not fear of people or people's reactions. And I see this a lot around me when people are talking about things like imposter syndrome, people who are afraid of turning up as who they are. People are so afraid of this. And I think I just won the autistic jackpot by having that bit of my brain not present. It never occurs to me for a second to think about what somebody else is going to think of me doing a thing.
That bit of my brain has turned up to like 1,000 all of the time.
That's really interesting. You're not the first person I've heard that from. This is part of the fascination in this. We're all different, aren't we?
I feel like I could just talk all night to you guys. You're so amazing. If there was something that you would want people to know about neurodiversity, but also intersectionality, what would you want someone that perhaps doesn't have any of that going on? What would you want them to know about people like you? So I'm not going to say you specifically, but just like, I wish people would just know this bit.
I guess if there's one thing that I would want every single person to know is like, I would much rather you ask the question that you think might be offensive. I'm like, I might tell you it's none of your business, but I'll do it nicely. I really don't mind that you asked. I understand why you're curious. It's the only way you're going to learn is by asking the question. It's big, it's new, it's threatening. It's not binary, it's scary. I get that. That's cool. Acknowledge that it freaks you out. Acknowledge that you don't understand what it is or how it fits with your understanding of the world. Just be aware of that. That's okay. Like, you're in the majority. That's totally fine. Don't feel that you need to be the expert on who I am, because you're not.
Oh, I love that.
If I'm existing in a place where there aren't walls, make sure not to, I need to make sure I'm not putting up walls in that space. And that's why it's an endless discovery. And of course there are certainties, but as a human being, we're always evolving. And also, yeah, totally, to be able to communicate that to other people, the way that we view how human beings should act has just been decided by someone. Like, it's not, none of it's real. Like, and like, sometimes I just want people to realize, like, no one's, if we all one day decided that autistic people were the absolute, that is the blueprint for how human beings should act, there's a whole lot of people on earth who would be like, oh my gosh, but I don't fit into that. Yeah, so we just one day decided that these group of people are how we should base everything. We should base how jobs work. We should base how schools work. We should base how society works. If any of those things were the norm, then there would be people who fit outside of that. There were so many civilizations that had people that didn't fit into the male and female, like, gender binaries, and that was completely wiped away from all of those civilizations when colonization happened. And like, so therefore we only have these binaries now because someone decided to do a thing, and therefore we have this thing. Someone decided that this is how we should all be, and so that's how we are. But it's all a decision that someone made. Like, it's not real. Like, so that's why I wish people could just see that. But like, the thing that everyone's clinging on to for dear life is it doesn't exist. You know.
I love that.
I really love that. And I love this. I think there will be people who admire that world without walls. I think people that will think, I'd quite like to live my life like that. That sounds really freeing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. The only thing that I would add in here in terms of thinking about as this message goes out to the world is to recognize that when any of us are having these conversations, or anyone listening to this is thinking of starting a conversation like this with anyone else, we all recognize that we all have had a lifetime of experience in being the people we are. And the experiences that we have, and the other person's experiences are an equal amount of a lifetime of experience. And if either of us come to that conversation with egos or a sense that my way is more right than your way, the conversation is going to have limits in how positive and progressive it can be for either party. So for us all to just be aware that we need to keep our own egos in check. We are all equally valid. That's the biggest thing that any of us can take into any of our interactions moving forward. Even if your position up to this point has had a lot of walls in it, that's okay too. That's been your story. And maybe those walls need to stay there for you to be comfortable moving forward, as long as you can recognize that other people don't have them.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, G. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Olive. I feel like I've learned so much just listening to you, and I really hope that other people have that experience too. I know they will. So thank you for sharing who you are with us.